My name is Jeff Schotland. I'm a commercial photographer. I've worked in Kansas City for over 35 years now, I guess. I was born in California. I moved all around the country. Spent 1 year in Pennsylvania. That 1 year in Pennsylvania, I met a friend whose father was an amateur photographer, and they had a darkroom. And at 9 years old, I developed my very first picture. That Christmas, I received my very first developing outfit. My dad knew I had the bug. He set me up with a Yankee developing kit. Also that Christmas, my grandmother bought me a Keystone 125. When I was in junior high school, I was taking high school classes in photography, and when I got into high school, I was taking college credit photography classes. Hero was one of the photographers that I just loved his commercial work. I loved the vibrancy of color of Art Kane. Those were people who really kind of sparked my interest and especially Hero in commercial work. His work for Vogue and all that was just phenomenal. So I really wanted to shoot large format film, work in the studio, be in total control of light. Today you hear so many people who advertise themselves as available light photographers. Well, yeah, as long as the available light's good, you've got plenty to work with, but otherwise you need to be able to control your own lighting and control your product. I had a studio I set up in the basement at home, a darkroom that I processed all my own film and prints and really got hooked. When it got time to go to college, I'd applied to several art schools. One of them being Kansas. At this time I was living in Chicago, but I had applied to the Kansas City Art Institute and was accepted there. I applied to RIT and was really disappointed to find out that RIT was, the photography program was only a 2-year program, and you spent your first 2 years as a regular student, as they would say, studying all of the core stuff, and that had no appeal to me. I applied to Rhode Island School of Design. I was provisionally accepted. They were concerned with my ability to draw. Wasn't on par with the rest of my talents. After all of that, wanting to go to art school and owning a large format camera since I was 16 years old, my parents, who were paying for college, fortunately, let me know that they would not pay for art school. Why didn't I want to become a photojournalist? And of course, I had no idea what a photojournalist was. Working for a newspaper had never crossed my mind, but I ended up at the University of Kansas in their journalism school, mostly because it was the furthest away from my parents. Well, the early years of my business, everything I shot was large format. I did a lot of catalog work in my early days. We shot film, and everything we shot was to size. If it appeared 8 inches tall in a catalog, we shot it with a piece of film that was at least 8 by 10 inches. If it was smaller, it got shot on 4x5 film. It's just the way that they saved money in producing catalogs in those days. I remember all the different processes from the beginning of photography, and the very first one, the daguerreotype, was one that I think there are people out there that are doing daguerreotypes. It can be a very deadly process if done improperly, because you actually fume or boil mercury to develop the image on a silver-plated copper plate. The next process was actually the calotype, which quickly was not very successful, which is the paper negative. And then after that, what they call wet plate collodion, and it was developed in 1851 by a gentleman in England named Frederick Scott Archer. The big problem they were having with photography in those early days is they would make an image and it would fade away. Well, they figured out a way to fix the image, and Frederick Scott Archer was making negatives which allowed Up until that time, everything was basically a one-off image. You couldn't reproduce it, you couldn't reprint it. He came up with what was called a wet plate collodion negative. Also during this time, there was people experimenting. He openly, let people mess with his invention. He published it and freely shared his knowledge. He actually died poor, didn't make any money from the process. But the next process, which I do, is called ambrotype. The whole process has to happen while the plate is wet, and I call it a plate. It's a sheet of glass. The piece of glass that I use is the actual piece of film that goes in the back of my camera. So I'm actually making my own film. The film is composed of collodion. It's nitrocellulose, the stuff that they made the old movies out of back in the 30s. I dissolved some salts in it. Typically, you could use any salt you wanted. You could use sodium chloride, which is the table salt we eat. I use potassium bromide, potassium iodide, and you dissolve just a minute amount in the collodion. And after you have this, what's called salted collodion, that's your emulsion, that's your film. The process is you take a piece of glass, you clean the glass, you grind the edges, you clean the glass till it's absolutely spotless. You take the plate, you pour the collodion on it, and then you slowly manipulate the glass plate so it covers each corner of the plate. You let it set up till it gets sticky, so it stops running basically, and then it gets immersed into a bath of silver nitrate. At the percent solution that I use for the wet plate collodion process, it makes the collodion light sensitive. It turns those halides or salts into light sensitive silver halides. And then I have a piece of film that now I have to be in the darkroom to load the sheet of film or the piece of glass into a film holder, and then it gets put in the camera. This process goes back to the mid-1800s, the Civil War. I'm sure some of you might still have pictures of your great-great-great-grandparent who was, fought for the North or the South. Those are tintypes. That's basically the wet plate collodion process on a sheet of metal. The photographs I make are forever. They're a lifetime. They won't go away. Yes, if you drop it, it will break. But for the most part, if you treat it with respect and care, it's going to last. Isabel, our model, her great-great-grandchildren are going to know what she looked like. I enjoy this photography because it's photography in its purest sense. I control all the lighting. I make my own film. I love working with lenses that are 150 years old. These cameras are wood. It's fun to think about all the people that they might have photographed over those years. 100 years from now, when they're looking at one of my wet plate collodion images, that they go, wow, this is neat. I wonder what this guy was like. And it's also interesting too. One of the interesting things is you look at these photographs, and the first thing you notice about them is they look old. They're not old, they were made yesterday. They were made today. The process has that look of age. So when you look at your great-great-great-grandparents fought in the Civil War or born in another country and moved to the United States, it doesn't look any older than it did the day it was made. It hasn't aged. I love to hear people ooh and ah, because it's the same thing that just trapped me into being a photographer, and I really like sharing that.